Okay, welcome, friends. Welcome. I'm Dr. David Litwa. It's great to see you. Great to have you. Thank you for joining me this beautiful Sunday afternoon. Uh, it is only 50 degrees Fahrenheit today in Boston, but I'm thankful anyway. It's great to have all of you. I hope I'm coming through okay. Please let me know. I am so excited to have this session today because I'm going to do basically what amounts to a raffle today. I'm going to give away uh, my Marcion course, and my the way you want to do this. I mean, there's lots of things that I could have done, mind you, to make this extremely tech savvy. But I'm going to go low tech, high fun. And so here are the rules of the game. Okay. And I've put this in the chat. So behind this card, okay, I have written a number between 1 and 100. Okay. And what I want you to do is I want you to put in the chat your guess what number this is. Okay. Now, I've designed this so that there will be a winner. Okay. So if no one gets the exact number, I will be doing the closest number. So, if the number is 1 and someone puts a 2 in the chat, then you've won. If the number is 100 and someone puts a 97 in the chat, and that's the highest number, then you win. And so actually more than one person can win this game. Okay, so that's the good news. So welcome one and all. I hope all of you are feeling blessed. I give you all the good energy that I have. It's been an exciting week here. This is week 2 of my blog, and I've gotten some good responses from people. And I've created a Facebook. Well, I originally designed a Facebook author page. I'm now calling it the Superfan page. So if you haven't checked that out, join that. Also, I should note with regard to the courses, I've done a lot of updating of the course page, and so if you just click on the link, I've got it up at the top of the chat. You'll see all my courses. And if you've already got the Marcion course, which is great, thank you, you can take your pick from any of the courses that I have. So I've got Marcion, I've got the Nascenes, Contours of an Early Christian Cult, I've got Carpocrates and Secret Mark, and I've got the Nag Hammadi and Gnostic Literature Part 1 and Nag Hammadi Gnostic Literature Part 2. And I've also got a survey on my website, okay? And this survey is designed so that I can get some feedback from people wanting to improve them further. And the cool thing about it is I can improve it. Like, you can purchase the course today, and as in the case with the Marcion course, I've basically expanded it to twice its length. So the people who initially bought the Marcion course got 6 lectures. Now there are 11 video lessons plus a lot more resources that I'm adding daily. Okay, so that's kind of like my baby. But I want to do all the courses well, and I want to be able to meet interests and needs. There's a lot. I mean, if you can get access to brick and mortar education, that's great, but it's expensive. It's sometimes dull. And let's face it, today in religious studies and religious education, when you're looking especially at Christianity, a lot of it has a theological or even an apologetic slant to it. and it's, taught from within the perspective of our particular religious tradition, and that's not always very helpful. You know, Having been in Australia for many years, there's really nothing. Really, the religious studies department in a secular university, like a public university, which I went to at the University of Virginia, Thomas Jefferson's University, where you have a secular department of religion. That really doesn't exist. You know, and the rare places where that does exist, even in the U.S., those departments are shrinking because, as you know, that administrators, and I don't like to use nasty language, but fat cats who want to make money, they realize that religious studies doesn't really make money. So unless you're in like a theologically or ecclesiastically backed seminary or theological or divinity school that has funding from churches, these Bible departments and religious studies departments are shrinking worldwide. Okay. And so you guys we're at the cusp of a great transition in education, where a lot of the education, I think, is going to shift online. And I'm trying to be part of that wave, really part of the vanguard, to offer the best religious studies education I can online, based on, the 12 or so years of education I got in religious studies, from, my BA to, I have a 3-year master's, I got another 1-year master's, and then I did 4 more years of PhD work. And so 12 years total. And then 12 years of experience on top of that, doing teaching, advising, reading, researching, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I'm trying to offer. I'm trying to offer you guys the best that I can and the highest quality that I can. Admittedly, there's a learning curve here, because I'm also learning how to, build and design a website, to create landing pages, to, upload more interactive videos and all that stuff. Okay. So I'm trying to do the best I can, and I need your feedback. So also on my website, which is just mdavidlitwood.com. Actually, let me just see if I've got the right. I'll give it to you exactly, so that everyone knows where it is. I'm going to give you the website link for the courses, because I've recently, the domain has recently changed. I've got my own domain, yay. But I've got all the courses there. But if you just go to the website itself, I've got as essentially one of the blog posts, I've got a survey which you can take, and it would be really helpful to me if some of you, if not all of you, would take that survey, because it's really about how I can better serve the changing needs and interests of people who are active online, whether through the blog or through the Patreon that I've got, or through through the courses, or other avenues that I'm at. I mean, even through Facebook right now. I'm not really a social media buff, but I've gotten into it. Okay. So if any of you are coming in later, this is a raffle. You can win free access to my Marcion course by picking a number from 1 to 100. At the end of this session, I'm going to reveal what the number is in the lucky winner. But for now, if there's any questions, please send them through, because I want to hear from you. This is going to be your classic AMA session. So this is your grand chance to ask if there's something on your mind, whether it's something related to the something that you're studying, or something that you heard about online, or something related to the blog posts that I've been able to post. I've now got, I'm up to, I think, 15, and I want to be able to post about 5 times a week. So look into that. You can subscribe for free. Jay-Z, you say, I work in the university advancement fundraising. The university I work for brings in more money through the med school than anything else. Yeah, religious and language studies are an afterthought. Yeah, that's kind of universal. Yeah. In my college, they make more money through one football game than they would 3 years serving, a religious studies department. um, and we depend on donors. Jesuit. Mine is a Jesuit school, and we just got a $25 million, influx, but it's just from donors. So, I mean, thank you, but that illustrates again my issue that we, like any other department, what we need is theologically neutral, for lack of a better term, secular, but to use a better term, open-minded and more historically focused departments of religion, rather than departments that are like your Bible Baptist seminaries and your Roman Catholic and your Roman Catholic schools for priests and theology schools. And I mean, some of these schools have kind of they've been able to somewhat detach themselves from their religious overhead, but a lot of these schools, they get their money from the church, right? So I'm not saying that's bad, but I'm saying that for religious studies, it's hard to be neutral. If you're getting your money from the church, you have a party line to walk. Just as imagine you were going out to dinner, and you knew that your friend, your rich friend, was buying dinner for everybody. Well, during that dinner, you're going to be very careful not to say anything that annoys your rich friend, because he's going to pay for the food. So you just keep smiling and nodding. That's sort of what happens with theology and theology schools and seminaries. Some of them, they don't have necessarily like you don't have to sign a creed or confession. I mean, in some you do, like Liberty University. I'm sure there's some kind of creed or whatnot, statement of faith that you need to sign. But even when you don't, what we're talking about is more like unspoken norms. And one of the great things about YouTube is, you can say anything, but then the downside, so you get people who are basically like outcasts from the academic community. But then the problem there is you've got so many people saying different things, right? And their own kind of pet theories and idiosyncratic speculation. And, the average person kind of has no idea whether that stuff is like up to snuff, like how another scholar would interact with that. And whether that has any real ability to survive a debate or a peer review. You can literally say anything and go down the rabbit hole with somebody. And so this has been one of the motivations for me designing courses, because it allows me to go to a level of depth where I would be unable to do just by posting random videos online or by appearing on a random podcast. The courses also enable me to, take you through a journey, like a curated journey where I'm your guide, and I'm going to teach you the sequence. I really feel strongly about online education and about improving online education. And it's one of the reasons why on my Patreon, I added the 10th tier, which is the academic advising tier. And I encourage everybody to go check that out. basically my idea, and I'm not sure if I'm entirely original, but I do think that it's not offered by most creators, is that I'm offering to people to become their academic advisor, essentially the closest thing to a PhD program that I could think of. There's a fair amount of people out there who I think, they took a course or two in religious studies or maybe history of Christianity or something like that. And basically um, they didn't fulfill the degree, or maybe they didn't want to pay, or whatever, or they didn't want to go as far as they wanted to go. Like maybe they got a master's but not a PhD, and so that's kind of what I'm offering in the highest tier. I become your academic advisor, and on that level, it's no longer about feeding you information that I think is really good quality educational and stuff that would pass peer review. On that level, when I become your academic advisor, I become the one who trains you how to think. Because the reality is, we are at this moment, we have no lack of information. We are utterly inundated with information. We just don't know how to judge it. And that's the problem with the information age. We literally are drowning in information, and we don't have the habits of mind and the kind of scholarly habits of thought that allow us to fully process that information, right? And to process it in a way that produces value for the world and produces value for ourselves and for the world. I think each and every one of you are able to write an academic article and to, pass peer review, and to think in a way that, your thoughts, this is the legacy question, this is the legacy issue, where there's not really a whole lot of rewards for getting into scholarship, but there is this reward of legacy. Some thoughts, they only last for a day, wacko kind of theories. Sometimes, they might go viral on YouTube for about 10 days and then people forget about them. But there are some thoughts and ideas that literally last 1,000 years or 2,000 years. You think of the Platonic dialogues. That's a great example of, you've got actual material, written material that has stood the test of time. And great philosophers, they didn't make anything from writing. They didn't make anything from teaching. Some of them were independently wealthy. Plato, was actually a very wealthy man. But their ideas have perdured through the ages. And, the more that I work on Marcion, the more that I see that, the basic picture of Marcion hasn't changed in over 100 years. So Adolf von Harnack, he wrote his book, or he wrote the second edition in 1924, and that he's still set the ruts or the treads of thought that people today still think in. And one of the main purposes of me writing a Marcion book is to fully replace Harnack, so that you don't have to go back to Harnack. And in fact, you probably shouldn't, because I think there's a lot of ways in which he got it wrong, really wrong. So that's about legacy. That's about writing something that lasts 100 years or 1,000 years. And that, many of us can do that, Welcome, Jason. Nice to see you in the chat. Folks, I don't see any questions in the chat. This is your opportunity. Don't let me just, spout about anything and everything. I don't even know if this is interesting to you. I'm just talking about academic life. But I'm trying to convince you that basically that you have the gold within you. Each and every one of you has value, has a kind of infinite value. And you are able, right? You are able to produce books and articles just like any other scholar. And at the highest tier that I offer, where I become your academic advisor, that's what I train you to do. I'll train you to write. I meet you weekly over Zoom. I, invite you into my inbox to ask questions. We chat every day if we need to. And basically it's like a discipleship tier, basically where I'm trying to train people so that when you hop on YouTube, you're able to discern the wheat from the chaff, and eventually you're able to become an expert in whatever field you want to become an expert in. That's the ultimate goal, right? And maybe you can leave your day job. This is what I'm trying to do. So why not spread the wealth? Thank you so much to S. Mill. Thanks so much for the super chat and the question. Really appreciate that. Keep those questions coming. This is your opportunity, okay? At the end of this session, we're going to draw a number, or I'm going to draw a number. I've already written the number, okay? It's on this card, all right? On the back of the card, you can't see it. And one lucky winner will gain access to the Marcion course. Okay, so S. Mill, thank you again. Do you think Thunder Perfect Mind may be a lament on the decline in allegiance to traditional religion in the 2nd and 3rd century from Egypt, or Isis as the speaker? That's interesting. When I read Thunder Perfect Mind, I don't get the vibe of lament. I get the vibe of pride and power. This is not the voice of a religion in decline. I know that Christian Bull has, in his great book, The Tradition of Hermes, argued that the Hermetic literature arose from priests who were essentially kind of, like many academics today, kind of banished from academy, or not banished, but, there's not enough funding. So they ended up on the streets instead of being paid, and, through taxes and their ability to remain priests in a temple area was, the money ran dry. And so they had to figure out other ways to make a living. So, and there are sometimes laments, like in the Asclepius, oh, Egypt, the gods have all become, shattered. And it's a terrible vision of, probably the birth of Christianity, or the increasing dominance of Christianity into the 3rd and 4th century, and the desolation of the temples. But when I read Thunder, I really read it as someone who is proud, and as someone who's learned a lot from the Isis religion, and someone who is adapting that for Christian use. And it is the voice of power. It is the voice of strength. And so, yeah, I wouldn't read that as a lament, unless there's a specific passage that you're referring to, in which case you can just put that in the chat and I can take a look at that. But yeah, I think texts like Thunder and Trimorpho Protanoia, these early Christian Gnostics, they weren't, like modern academics, fearful of what the administrators would do. They didn't have to worry about administration. They were proud to be who they are. They might have been poor, dirt poor, and living under a bridge somewhere, but they were extremely proud to have gnosis, because gnosis is power, and you've only got to have one person to share that power with. It's great energy. And hopefully I can share some of that energy with you today. Jay-Z, thank you so much for your super chat. Really appreciate it. It's great to have you. Many of you are very faithful guests on these AMA sessions. I really appreciate it. What were the key philosophical influences on Carpocrates' thoughts, and how did he synthesize philosophical traditions to develop his unique theology? So I think that's a really good question. I think Carpocrates, the dominant philosophical influence, I'd have to say, was Neo-Pythagorean thought. And this is an interesting trait that not a lot of people know about. Like, a lot of people know that Christianity is very Platonic, but what people don't know about is that second century Platonism had really fused with Neo-Pythagoreanism. And so you had all these Platonists who were also very much into numbers and number theory. And it explains the Valentinian pleroma. They were playing with numbers that had already been played with by Pythagoreans, who were asking the questions of what numbers generate what numbers. And if the ultimate reality is number, then we need to get back to the one, and how the one becomes two, and how the two becomes four, and how the four becomes eight, and so on. So that's what they were thinking about. I think it's probably fallen out of favor, but the way that we can tell that Carpocrates was very into Neo-Pythagoreanism is because he had a very robust doctrine of transmigration. He had a son, Epiphanes, who was only 17 when he died, but Carpocrates thought that his son was one of these wondrous souls, like the soul of Plato or Pythagoras, that came in and was like already on the cusp of, it was already like a bodhisattva. It was already, it didn't need to be incarnated, but it came into a body in order to teach human beings. And I think, there is no hell in Carpocrates' system. There's only a series of transmigrations. That's very Pythagorean. He viewed Jesus as basically like Pythagoras, that Jesus is his soul is no different from any of our souls, but that soul was just more advanced. It had gone through more lifetimes, and it didn't need to be incarnated anymore. Sort of like how Philo viewed Moses. Moses' soul was so wise. He was such a sage that he became incarnate, but he didn't need to become incarnate. He could have graduated to the seventh heaven or the 10th heaven, or however many they thought they were, and just hung out there. But no, he decided to become incarnate to help human beings. That's very much the Pythagorean way of thinking, and that's very much how Carpocrates thought of Jesus. And that's why we are all equal to Jesus and able even to exceed him. It's because our souls are all on a journey. Some of us are just further ahead. Some of us have lived 1,000 lives. Some of us have lived those 1,000 lives well, and we've advanced on every stage. Some of us have done not so well, and we have declined at every stage. One of the interesting modifications of second century Pythagoreanism is they refuse to believe that human souls enter animals. This has become more and more of a trend. But even Plutarch would joke about the soul of Nero entering into a frog, and so on and so forth. So the ideas were out there. Definitely that Alexandrian context, hugely influenced by that Neo-Pythagorean variant of Platonism, and that continues all the way through Plotinus. So thank you for your question. Okay, so I'm just going to check through here. Michael E., thank you so much for your super chat. Nice to see you, Einar. Appreciate you coming. Let's see, Michael, did early Christians prioritize preparing for the future parousia over fidelity, loyalty to the past event of Christ's teachings, death, and resurrection? Well, it's probably not an either or here. I think, I don't think Gnostics, though, were really looking toward the parousia at all. I think that they had internalized the parousia, that had already happened. The resurrection had already happened. The second coming had already happened. It's not because they're post-millennialists. It's because they literally think that those events that are expected by others are actually internal events of the mind. They're entirely intrinsic events of the mind and the spirit. I think Gnostics, they're trying not to live in the future or the past. The advantage of the past in looking at Jesus' death and resurrection is to see him as a model. He's just a model for the Gnostic. And he's the first guy who comes to the enlightenment, basically, to the full realization of his fullness. And so that's why Christ is important, because he's the first to achieve that, not because he is inherently the second person of the Trinity. He's divine because he becomes divine. I think in a more traditional vein, I mean, you'll hear other scholars talking about the apocalyptic Jesus, and if you're interested in the historical Jesus, that's interesting. He probably was something like an apocalyptic prophet, and he probably did start like an apocalyptic or millenarian movement, but it didn't end up like that. And there are other documents, people who believe in Q, believe that there was early Christianity is not apocalyptic, or some of these people who uphold Q. But I think, depending on how early you think the Gnostic Christian thought emerged, I wouldn't say that's apocalyptic, unless you refer to the apocalypse of the mind. They're still apocalyptic, but they've internalized the apocalypse. So the apocalypse is entirely internal. And I should say that internal doesn't mean necessarily only within the individual. The internal means within the community. The kingdom of God is within you. That's Luke 17:21. It just he vazilia to theou en hemin estin, or en humin, sorry. And en humin doesn't really mean it's not a singular you. It's not in you singular. It's in you plural. So it's a communal event. It's internal, but it's internal to the community. And yes, obviously there were people who remained apocalyptic, far into the 2nd century. You can read the Shepherd of Hermas. He's kind of like your 2nd century apocalyptic writer. And yes, people do continue to, Christians do continue to believe in the end of the world and all of that jazz. But by and large, by the time you get to the 2nd century, and we see this debate played out in 2 Peter, they're not really thinking the end of the world is around the corner. So they're not prioritizing or sweating much over the future parousia. And I would say most traditional Christians by the mid-2nd century, are going to be more oriented toward the past rather than the future. That's also a difference in culture. In Greek culture, there's a heavy emphasis on the past and not much thought about the future. They kind of assume that the future is always going to be the same. But we, in the post-industrial era and the digital age, we kind of think like the future is going to be really, really different and amazing. Let's hope so. Well, I guess, given climate change, I guess we don't think that. We have our own modern apocalypse, and that's, the climate disaster. But assuming that we could avoid that, if we wised up, assuming we could avoid that, then yes, heck, the sky's the limit. We could be on Mars in a decade. And, go further. Let's go further than Mars. Honestly, Mars is just a stopping point. Okay, so I'm going to get to the next question here. S. Mill, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. You coming back. On your super chat, maybe not so much on lament, but calling people back to the truth of greatness of Egyptian deities rather than abandoning it and mistreating it, as opposed to a more general God or women being all things and all people. Yeah, I'm starting to get it now. Yeah, I think you're on the right track. The old term for this, which I try not to use, is syncretism. The Thunder Perfect Mind is the perfect example of why native Egyptian religion and Christianity are utterly and perfectly compatible, because it's a Christian document, but it's entirely in the voice and persona of Isis. That Isis lives through that text, and it's clear that if you're comparing these Isis erotologies, where she's, I was going to say boasting, but that's not really fair. She's vaunting her powers, which are legitimate. She is the goddess who can save the world. She is the first world savior. Long before Jesus got into that line of work, she was the savior of the world when Jesus was still in diapers. And she continues to speak well, I should say swaddling clothes. He was in swaddling clothes. But Isis continues to speak through the ages. And I think, people can have a dismal view of native Egyptian religion and that it died, you know. But it really didn't actually, because when you look at Egyptian Christianity, you see just like you would expect it when you see like South American Christianity, it picks up all these cultural variants, which don't end up like on as barnacles on a pure essence. They end up as changing the essence of the faith, right? And so that's why you get a lot of emphasis on deification in these native Egyptian expressions of Christianity, and even in Orthodox Alexandrian theologians like Didymus the Blind, Athanasius, Cyril of Alexandria. They're all hot on deification because it's part of that specifically Alexandrian, specifically Egyptian mindset that people do become gods. That's very powerful. That's a very powerful idea. That's a native Egyptian idea. Heck, if you drown in the Nile, you become a god. If the Nile takes you, that's your path to deification, and that's an amazing, powerful thing. And they mean that in a very realistic way. If you've ever been to Egypt, you can go to the tombs and or read the Book of the Dead or whatever, and see that, yeah, they're talking about individual people becoming gods in a real afterlife scenario. That's Egypt. They're all on that idea thousands of years before the Christians get to it. So absolutely. One of the great things about Nag Hammadi is that it teaches us, and I think most of the texts in Nag Hammadi are Egyptian Christian texts or Christian Egyptian texts, depending, it really doesn't matter, but they are expressions of native Egyptian Christianity. And they show the vibrancy of those discourses. Now, those discourses, those religious discourses, like the powerful voice of Isis speaking through time, she gets folded into different religious expressions, but you can still hear her tone. Like, even if you didn't know that Isis spoke that way, you can still be mesmerized by thunder, And, you'd have to take a course in Egyptian history or, during the Greco-Roman or Hellenistic period to find out that that's exactly how Isis spoke. Those are her, it's not exactly her words, but it's her tone and it's her powerful demonstration of her own power. And sometimes it's expressed in a paradoxical way. That's Isis's trademark. Isis had a brand, and we're no longer able to recognize aspects of that brand. But by learning history and by, delving into this a little bit, we get to see that this, and so to use a metaphor, the trademark of Isis and the brand of Isis and the brand colors of Isis and her tone and her majesty are all over that text. And so it's a great example of, people want to shed a tear for the death of Egyptian religion. And I just say, yeah, have you read Thunder? I mean, look at this. I mean, this continues to exist like in another religious form. And that's often the case even when you look at religious architecture. The Dome of the Rock is built on the Temple Mount for a reason. But, when you go to places like Israel or, other places in the Middle East or North Africa or Europe, you see the Romans build churches, not at random, but they build them over the Mithraic caves, They build them over the temples to other gods because that's already a sacred space, and they're just building on top of it, sort of in a stack or a layer, And so that those PowerPoints of religious energy, they perdure through the centuries, even though we call those different religions. They have been, those discourses and those energies have been folded over into each other, so that I say that a lot of Greco-Roman religion actually hasn't died. And that's why I'm not a perennialist, but I do believe that the energies of ancient religions and the energies of ancient religious texts, when we read them again today, they can inspire in us new affective ways of being and new religious ways of being and new spiritual insights, which allow people then to basically form new religious expressions based on these ancient texts. And some of these, like Nag Hammadi, we had like a 1600-year gap in the reception history, but now that we got it back, that's having a huge effect. Absolutely, yeah. Yes, she's the voice of deity, the voice of heaven. When gods speak, that's how they sound. That's how Zeus sounded. When he nods in Homer, thunder strike. There's a rumble of thunder. So yes, you speak with the voice of thunder. Absolutely. Yes, and yes, David Frankfurter. Yes, thank you, Jason. This is David Frankfurter, and David Frankfurter, wants to redeem the term syncretism, which is bold, and that's fine. But as long as you know what I'm talking about, like I'm not trying to. I'm not even saying that ISIS took over Christianity or that Christianity raped ISIS, or I'm saying that there really were honest Christians out there. And maybe today, who can also be ISIS worshipers, right? Like I say, Judaism has never really been monotheistic, and I don't think Christianity has ever really been monotheistic. Like that's Islam. I mean, Islam finally got to like pure monotheism, but Judaism, Christianity, they never got there. They're not there today. They'll never get there. They'll never get there. That's okay. That's okay. They grew out of polytheism, and those polytheistic energies, those multiple energy access points, are still with us today. Okay, so so for those of you who've joined, this is your chance. This is essentially a very low-tech raffle where I'm going to be picking a number, and so everyone should put a unique number in the chat, okay? And the number that is closest to the number that I have chosen, and it's pre-chosen, okay? It's on this card, okay? On the back of this card. And in about 10 minutes, I'm going to reveal what that number is, and the person closest to that number will get free access to my Marcion course. If you happen to already have the Marcion course, you can take your pick of any particular course that you want, or if you have all the courses, I mean, wow, that would be amazing. We'll come to some other agreement. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll up here for a second here and see if there's any more questions. We have one from C. Petrovic. Why do you think Marcion lost the battle to disassociate Christianity from Yahweh, given that the growth of the religion occurred in the Gentile world and not the Jewish world? Well, we have to think like cui bono here, who benefits? And it just happens to be that most Christians in Rome, at least, thought that it would be better for them to connect themselves to a religion with a couple thousand-year pedigree than present themselves to the Romans as a newfangled cult. So, a lot of the rejection of Marcionism isn't because, he's theologically wrong. It's because he's politically in the wrong place, because the Christian apologists, both today and in the second century, are kind of bending over backwards to say that their religion is as old as creation, or at least, they can't convince the Romans of that, but they could convince the Romans that they were the true inheritors of Judaism and the true promises in Jewish scripture. I think it's fair to say that we recognize that as a massive act of cultural appropriation that is probably, one of the most, politically incorrect things that have ever happened in all of human history. as Nietzsche put it, the Christians stole the Bible from under the feet of the Jews and claimed it and said, it's our book, and you guys don't even understand it. Yeah, we know that you wrote it. We know that you read it, but it's ours now, and you don't understand it. I mean, it's like the boldest move ever, but it's thought to be like a necessary political move to say that, the Jewish God is the same as the Christian God. The Jewish scriptures are the Christian scriptures, because then that gives Christianity this immense boost of cultural capital. And it prevents the Romans from killing you. Basically, it is a very, very, very practical end. Okay, getting close to the end of the hour here. I just want to see if there's any questions here that I can get to. Some of these. Yes, thank you, Matthew. What interests me is how alternative Christianities may have influenced later traditions, including Islam. Yep, yeah. Yeah, it's probably not mostly Orthodox Christianity that influences Islam. That's definitely true. Let's see. Jay-Z, you may have seen the recent book published by Justin Sledge. Have you ever considered doing something similar for early Christian studies? I actually haven't seen that. I'm going to have to check that out. If there's a link there, you send me that. Send me the link. I know Justin doesn't want to publish in traditional academic outlets, which is something that I heard from him a while ago, but I don't know what he's cooked up there. So let me know. Yes, Jason, Thunder Perfect Mind for me is a take on the barbarian wisdom paradigm over against Hellenic philosophy. Right? Yep, that's there. But, ironically, barbarian wisdom is also, Hellenic. It's like the barbarians, I mean, they're still speaking Greek. It's like Hellenism versus a different kind of Hellenism. Ramunas, in your article, Homology and Deification, you wrote, whereas John's Jesus alone sees the Father, Thomas offers the vision to all. Why to all and not to the chosen few? Well, I take your point. Yeah, I mean, it's to all in theory, right? So the first saying is that, whoever understands these words or reads and understands these words, will not taste death. So you've got to become an initiate by reading the mysteries in the texts, okay? But in theory, if everyone was willing to do that, and I know that they're not, I think most of us would just rather veg out. But assuming we were all wanting to take Thomas up on his challenge, then yes, it is in theory open to all who would want to work at it, right? Okay, see, Petriuk, who was Jesus' father according to Marcion, if not the God of Judaism? Well, that's just the point. That the God of Judaism isn't a God. It's just an intermediate pretender, like a daimon. It's one of the things that Porphyry says. Eumenius too, that there are these daimones who are so trickster-like and mischievous that they present themselves as gods, and this is what the Judean Lord does. So the father of Jesus for Marcion is the true God. That's why that Justin calls Marcion's Jesus another son, not even the same son as what he has. Another father and another son, or I should say, another son of the true Father. So yeah, he's not the Jewish Messiah. He's the son of the true God. Can you give us a reading list to start in our learning journey? I can, but I can do something better for you. If you just join Patreon, you can join for free or take a 7-day trial. I've got lots of bibliographies and book summaries and article summaries on Patreon, waiting there already, as well as some bibliographies. I released this week Pagan Jerusalem, and there's a lot more to read for Aelia Capitolina or Hadrian's Jerusalem, and I released on Patreon some further reading that you could do, because even in that video, you know, that's just kind of like breaking the ice, right? And can you talk a bit about a concept of our great power, who wrote it, and is it attributed to Simonian? So this week, friends, I got my copy of Simon of Samaria. Okay, so I know that it's out in hardback, at least. I know that it's awfully, awfully priced. Okay, I totally know that. But the concept of our great power is chapter 2 of that book. And it's also in my Nag Hammadi course, Nag Hammadi, okay, this is going to be Nag Hammadi part 2. Okay. And I've got both a reading of the concept of great power and also my exposition of it. It definitely does have Simonian flavors. I wouldn't say it's like a straight out Simonian text, but it's clearly by someone who knows a bit of the Simonian lingo. So go check that material out. Let me know what you think. Let's see, Jason, also similar to how Ephraim of Nisibis portrayed death in Jesus' descent into hell, the portrayal is also similar to a traditional Mesopotamian way of depicting death. That's right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think Ephraim is a great example of someone who seems to be like a very dogmatic and narrow-minded thinker, and maybe he was, but that doesn't mean that consciously or unconsciously or subconsciously they're not also tapping into these, you know, traditions, essentially, in his case, like these old Mesopotamian myths. And he is literally Mesopotamian. He is, you know, between the rivers. So, you know, what we can only, you know, thousands of years later see like how he was influenced by the old Mesopotamian mythology. I don't think he saw it even himself. Just as, you know, I don't think we in Europe or America or Australia or Africa or wherever we are, we're really quite aware of how deeply we've been affected by our cultural mythologies, right? And it only becomes clear much later when culture doesn't have the value of like ultimacy. Like today, we're so thick into our own culture that we can't see through it. It's like we're underwater. But when our culture dies or transforms into something else, then we can see that, oh, okay, yeah, he was influenced by that really dominant cultural myth. Where we don't have that myth anymore, so we see that. That happens all the time. Okay. All right. Yes, Dan McCollum is rejoicing right now. Yep. Okay, so I think everyone has chosen a number. If you haven't, you're only choosing a number between 1 and 100. So don't guess 616. Although that's a great number. It's the true number of the beast, by the way. Okay. All right. So it looks like everybody. Let's see. Okay, thank you for sending me Justin's list. Okay, good. But it looks like everybody has put in a number between 1 and 100. Now, the rule is, as I said, like if no one has guessed the exact number, then the person with the number closest will be the winner. So you can have more than one winner. Okay, but we've designed this game so that someone must win. Okay. All right. Now I don't have a drum roll here, but so at this point, I'm going to reveal the number, and as I said, okay, I have written this, you know, before our session started. So this is the number that I chose, 77. Okay. Now I noticed that I believe there's more than one person who chose 77. Don't change your number in the chat. But I believe, unless I'm mistaken, there is more than one person who chose 77. Let me see here. I think Michael E., you might have chosen 77, but then you changed your number. Let me see. I may be wrong. Okay, maybe it's because Michael E., you changed your number. No, so we have Tashi, and forgive me if I'm not pronouncing your name right, excuse me. Tashi Najima, you are the grand winner of this raffle. Okay. S. Mill, you were very close, 75. Very nice, very nice. We had an 81. Okay. But we have a wonderful, wonderful winner. Tashi, thank you so much for playing. So what will happen, Tashi, is I need you to just do one thing for me. I only need your email. It can be any email. You can create a fake email if you want, or just a one-use email. I need you to get me your email, and then I can sign you up for free access to the course. And I'll make I'll make a final plug to everybody. I'm really seeking for feedback on my courses. So if you're able to provide me any feedback, if you've taken one of the courses or you're working your way through it, please let me know. I've also got a survey on my website, I'll paste the link here again. This is the link to the courses. Check out all those courses. Let me know what you think. I'm constantly improving and wanting to improve. But I've also got a survey on my website, which is just, it's just there as a blog post. If you just go to the top post and scroll down, I would love your feedback on how I can better serve you, what kind of courses you're interested in, what kind of blog posts you're interested in, and how I can better serve you as someone online trying to deliver value to people like you who are coming here, spending time on this beautiful Sunday afternoon. And I really appreciate it. And again, I really appreciate everybody for making this a very special time. And I hope it is special for you. Tashi, again, send me your email. That's all I need. Congratulations. Thank you to everyone here again. And take care, all of you. Have a great week.